remember the glow of the chandelier that night, soft and golden, casting shadows across the polished oak table. Every seat was filled. My father at the head, my sister Claire to his right, my husband Mark across from me. Forks scraped against china, glasses chimed together, and for a moment, it looked like the picture of a perfect family dinner. I smiled when someone told a joke. I nodded when they passed me the breadbasket. But my eyes were moving, quietly taking inventory of every face at that table. There was an edge to the laughter. A little too quick. A little too rehearsed. That's when my phone buzzed in my lap. An unknown number. 5 words that didn't make sense. At least not yet. Keep calm. They're setting you up. My smile stayed on my lips, but my pulse picked up speed. I tucked the phone under the napkin, glanced at the table again. Claire was talking about Dad's retirement plans. Mark was buttering his bread like nothing in the world could disturb him. No one was looking at me, but it suddenly felt like everyone was. Before I could process the message, the phone lit up again. This time it wasn't a text. It was a number I recognized instantly. My best friend Mia. And under her name 97 missed calls. A cold weight settled in my stomach. 97 calls? From Mia? I tried to think back. Had I put my phone on silent earlier? Had I missed an emergency? But I didn't get to finish that thought. Because Mia's voicemail, still saved in my inbox to this day, would end up being the thread that unraveled everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my sister, and even my own father. And the most terrifying part? We hadn't even finished the salad course. If this is your first time coming across one of our stories, welcome. Please hit the like button and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. And don't scroll away, because what happened next no one saw coming. And if you enjoy stories like this, be sure to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too. I got the call about the dinner 2 weeks earlier. Claire's voice had been unusually warm on the phone, almost syrupy. She said she wanted to plan something special for Dad's retirement. Nothing too fancy, just a chance for the family to be together without distractions. I remember hesitating before I said yes. There was history between us. Claire had always been the one who could do no wrong, the one my parents leaned on, the one whose mistakes were forgiven before she even admitted to them. I, on the other hand, had worn the label of difficult for as long as I could remember. Still, she sounded genuine, and for Dad's sake I agreed. It wasn't unusual for us to gather for birthdays or holidays, but something about this felt staged. Maybe it was just me overthinking. Or maybe deep down I already sensed the cracks forming beneath the surface. When I arrived that evening, the house was dressed for an occasion. Candles flickered on every side table. A centerpiece of fresh white lilies sat in the middle of the dining table, their fragrance mixing with the aroma of roasted chicken and herbs drifting from the kitchen. The plates were set with precision, silverware polished until it gleamed. Claire had thought of everything. Dad was smiling, genuinely happy to see me. His hug felt warm, but there was a stiffness to it that I couldn't quite place. Mom was in her element, moving between the kitchen and dining room, fussing over the smallest details. Mark stood beside Claire at the table when I walked in, both of them mid-laugh. The sound cut off a little too abruptly when they saw me. Claire recovered quickly, wrapping me in a quick hug, her perfume clinging to my sweater. Mark kissed me on the cheek, but avoided my eyes. We all settled into our seats. Conversation flowed easily enough, mostly about Dad's career and retirement plans. But every so often, a remark would land heavier than it should. Claire mentioned how she had been handling some of Dad's affairs, her eyes flicking toward me like she was waiting for a reaction. Mom asked if I'd finally managed to get my finances under control, then quickly laughed like it was a harmless joke. I smiled, but inside, each comment stacked on top of the last like small deliberate stones. Mark was quieter than usual. Normally, he'd fill in the silences, but tonight, his focus stayed on his plate. He nodded in agreement whenever Claire spoke but didn't contribute much else. Once, when I looked at him, he glanced away so quickly it almost felt rehearsed. That's when my phone buzzed for the first time. I didn't pull it out right away. I didn't want to seem rude, especially with Claire watching me so intently. But a few minutes later, when the conversation shifted away from me, I slid the phone under the edge of the table and checked it. The message was short. 5 words from an unknown number. Keep calm. They're setting you up. I read it twice, my heart thudding harder with each pass. Who would send me something like that? What did they mean by setting me up? I glanced at Mia's empty chair in my mind. She wasn't here, but she was the one person who would warn me if something was wrong. Could it be her? And if it was, why not just say her name? I tucked the phone back under the napkin and tried to focus on the room. My gaze swept across the table, lingering on each person. Claire was telling Dad a story about her first job. Mom was refilling water glasses. Mark was chewing slowly, too slowly. Every time someone laughed, I couldn't tell if the sound was for the story or at my expense. I kept replaying the text in my head. The words felt heavy, as if they carried a weight I wasn't ready to understand. I tried to dismiss it, to tell myself it was a prank or a mistake. But when I felt my phone vibrate again, and saw Mia's name on the screen with 97 missed calls, my stomach dropped. 97. That wasn't a pocket dial. That was desperation. That was urgency. I didn't excuse myself from the table, but I felt my face tighten. I gripped my fork a little harder, tried to mask my breathing. I could hear Claire's voice in the background, but it was just noise now. My focus narrowed to the glowing screen, and the unanswered questions building in my chest. Why would Mia call me nearly 100 times in one evening? Why hadn't I heard the phone sooner? And most importantly, what exactly was going to happen at this table that I needed to keep calm for? Whatever it was, I knew one thing. It hadn't started yet. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to wait and see. I waited until Claire launched into another long story about one of her business trips, the kind she loved to embellish, to quietly push my chair back. I mumbled something about needing to freshen up, and slipped my phone into my hand under the table. My legs carried me down the hall faster than I intended, heels clicking softly against the hardwood until I reached the bathroom. I locked the door and immediately dialed Mia. The call barely rang before it went to voicemail. Her voice sounded strained, rushed, like she'd recorded it in the middle of an argument. "Don't trust them," she said, her tone low but urgent. Then a click. No name. Just that warning hanging in the air. I stared at the phone, debating whether to call again, but my hands felt suddenly cold, my palms damp. If I called back and someone else answered, someone who shouldn't have her phone, what would I say? I pressed the phone to my chest for a moment, trying to steady my breathing, then tucked it away. I splashed cool water on my face, forced a small smile in the mirror, and walked back to the table. Claire's eyes found me the second I returned. She leaned back in her chair and, in that bright voice she used whenever she was about to say something cutting, announced, "So, have you finally recovered from that little spending spree last year?" The words landed like a dart. My fork paused halfway to my plate. A few cousins chuckled politely. Dad frowned slightly but didn't say anything. Claire kept her gaze locked on me, waiting for me to defend myself. I kept my voice even. "I don't know what you're talking about." Mark smirked without looking directly at me. "Come on," he said lightly. "You do have a talent for making money disappear." He delivered it like a joke, but there was an edge under the words that scraped against my nerves. The table shifted with small movements, chairs creaking, hands fidgeting with napkins. I caught Mom's face just as she lowered her eyes to her plate. Her lips pressed together, and for a moment, I thought she might say something, but she stayed silent. That silence told me more than any words could. I turned my attention back to Claire. She tilted her head slightly, studying me with a kind of satisfaction that made my skin prickle. Then, as if forgetting I was still watching, she leaned toward Mark and whispered something behind her hand. His jaw tightened, his eyes flicked to mine, and then he looked away again. I felt the air in the room shift, as if an unspoken agreement had just passed between them. And in that instant, I realized the warning text and Mia's voicemail weren't random at all. They were a crack in the surface of something deliberate, something that had been set in motion long before I walked through the door that night. And it was still unfolding, right here, in front of everyone. This was only the first crack in the mask. If you think this is bad, what came next would make you question every person you've ever trusted. Subscribe now, because you won't believe how deep this betrayal went. Claire waited until the plates from the main course had been cleared, until conversation lulled just enough for every ear at the table to catch the sound of her voice. She reached into her handbag with a deliberate slowness, the The kind that makes people look without realizing they're doing it. I wasn't sure if I should bring this up tonight, she began, eyes scanning the table as if measuring the room. But I think it's important we're all on the same page, especially now that Dad's retired. Her hand emerged holding a neat stack of papers. The edges were perfectly aligned, the top sheet crisp and white except for the bold black lettering at the top. Even before she laid it flat in front of her, I recognized the layout of a bank statement. And at the top, in clear type, was my name. This, she said, tapping the page with a manicured nail, is from the inheritance account Dad set up for both of us after Mom's surgery. The account we agreed neither of us would touch unless it was an emergency. She let her gaze rest on me, her voice softening in a way that didn't match her words. It's empty now. For a moment, it was as though the room had tilted. My ears caught the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the faint tick of the clock on the wall, but the rest of the world felt strangely far away. I blinked at the paper, then at her, unsure if I'd misheard. What? It was all I could manage. She slid the statement across the table, the paper gliding over the polished wood until it stopped in front of me. Every transaction line was highlighted in yellow, each withdrawal listed under my name. The final balance read 0. I looked up at her, my throat tightening. I didn't take this money. Her brows arched slightly, as though she'd expected that response. The bank disagrees. These withdrawals were made over the past 6 months. All from your access card. I searched the faces around the table. Dad's expression was unreadable, his mouth set in a firm line. Mom stared at her lap. Mark just kept his eyes on his glass of wine, swirling it slowly like he was waiting for someone else to speak. Mark, I said, my voice sharper now, you know I haven't touched that account. He didn't look at me. I don't handle your accounts, he said simply, the words flat, offering neither defense nor doubt. The silence that followed was heavier than anything Claire had said. It was the sound of everyone sitting still, waiting to see what I would do. I pushed the papers back toward her, the edges catching against the wood. This isn't mine. Those aren't my transactions. And if you think... Claire's smile didn't falter, but her eyes flicked to Dad again. I'm not accusing you, I'm just concerned. We should all be concerned. She placed a hand over Dad's, a gesture meant to look protective, but her gaze never left mine. And then the warning text replayed in my head, as if the words were being spoken aloud in that moment. Keep calm. They're setting you up. I felt the truth click into place. Not the full picture, but enough to know I was already standing in the trap they'd built for me. And the worst part was that everyone at this table had just been given a front row seat. I kept my hands folded in my lap, forcing myself to breathe evenly, but inside, something sharp was turning over and over. Claire's words sat on the table like an open wound, drawing quiet stares from every direction. I didn't answer her again. Instead, my mind pulled me backward, combing through the last few months for anything that might explain how we'd gotten here. I remembered the way Mark had started keeping his phone face down on the counter. At first, I thought nothing of it. People do that when they're trying to be present. But then he began carrying it into the shower, keeping it in his pocket even when we were at home. If it buzzed and I glanced at it, his hand would cover it before I could see the screen. When I asked who it was, he'd answer vaguely, work stuff, or wrong number. And then there was Claire. She'd shown up at our house twice in the past few weeks, both times unannounced. The first time she claimed she was just dropping off a set of old photo albums Mom wanted me to have. She stayed only a few minutes, but I noticed she kept looking toward the study, where I kept important files and personal paperwork. The second time she brought over a pie, still warm, as if she'd been baking all morning just for me. Mark answered the door that time, and I came downstairs to find them laughing at something on his phone. They both fell silent when I entered the room. It was Dad's comment a few days later that started to stitch those moments together. He'd mentioned in passing that Claire had been helping him sort through his legal paperwork, since retirement was coming up. He said it like it was a blessing, like she was doing him a great favor, but something about it didn't sit right with me. Claire had never been interested in handling anyone else's affairs, unless there was something in it for her. And now, staring at that bank statement with my name printed at the top, I knew this wasn't just about money. Claire didn't need to humiliate me in front of the family just to prove a point. She could have done that 100 other ways. This was calculated. She wanted my credibility stripped away, piece by piece, until no one in this room would believe me, no matter what I said next. Mark's silence told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't confused or caught off guard. He was part of this. Whether he'd agreed to it from the start or simply let himself be pulled along, I couldn't say yet, but his refusal to meet my eyes was as loud as any accusation Claire could make. I sat there, smiling faintly at nothing in particular, while the realization settled in like cold water creeping under a closed door. They weren't just trying to make me look irresponsible. They were trying to cut me out completely. From the family. From Dad's trust. From every decision and resource that came with his retirement. And if they were willing to drag my name through the mud in front of everyone I loved, there was no telling what they had already done behind closed doors. When I finally saw Mia's name flashing on my screen, my pulse thudded so loud it felt like the whole restaurant could hear it. I excused myself from the table again, ignoring Claire's smirk as I stood, and stepped into the corridor near the back entrance. The air smelled faintly of bleach and fried food, but my hands were trembling too much to notice for long. Mia. I whispered, clutching the phone to my ear. Her voice was barely audible, almost as if she was hiding somewhere. You don't have much time. Your name. It's about to be on police reports. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. What are you talking about? Claire and Mark, she continued, her tone laced with urgency. They filed a fraud claim against you this morning. Said you drained the inheritance account and forged Dad's signature on a withdrawal slip. The corridor seemed to tilt. My knees wobbled, and I pressed my back against the wall to steady myself. That's insane. I know, Mia cut in. And I can prove it. But you need to understand, this isn't just about the money. I overheard Claire bragging to her friend on the phone, saying she'd finally make you pay for stealing Dad's attention. When you were kids. She's been planning this for months. Her words landed like shards of glass. Every memory of Claire's passive-aggressive comments, every little dig over the years, suddenly rearranged into a sharper, more dangerous picture. And Mark? I asked even though I already feared the answer. Mia's pause was enough. He's on her side. I don't know if she has something on him or if he's just in it for himself. But he's helping her. I saw them together 2 weeks ago, meeting with a lawyer. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat, my eyes burning. My own husband, my partner, plotting with my sister. And my father, would he believe them? He had always been close to Claire despite her drama, but he'd never doubted me before. The thought of him looking at me with suspicion was almost worse than the fraud accusation. I pressed my forehead into my palm, willing my mind to clear. My life was unraveling right in front of me, thread by thread, and they were the ones holding the scissors. Mia, I whispered. If this goes through, they'll ruin me. My job, my reputation, that's what they want, she said quickly. But you have one advantage. They think you don't know yet. Use that. Keep quiet, act normal. And don't give them anything they can twist. My heart pounded harder, each beat an echo of betrayal. I forced myself to breathe evenly before stepping back toward the dining room. I could already hear Claire's voice carrying over the clinking of glasses, laughing about something. Mark's laugh joined hers, a low, familiar sound that now felt foreign. I slid back into my seat, my face a mask. No one could know I'd just been handed the truth. Not yet. Not until I had a way to dismantle whatever they were building against me. But as I looked at my husband and my sister sitting side by side, their chairs angled toward each other like conspirators, I realized something with chilling clarity. This wasn't going to be a fight for my innocence. It was going to be a war for my survival. And I was already badly outnumbered. I had a plan. But I want to hear from you. What would you do if someone you loved betrayed you like this? Leave your answer in the comments. I'm curious how you'd handle it. Now here's how I handled mine. I held my glass, my knuckles tightening around the stem until I feared it might snap. Claire's voice floated through the air, syrupy sweet and dripping with false warmth. To family, she said, eyes meeting mine for just a fraction of a second longer than necessary. It wasn't a toast, it was a declaration of victory. She thought she'd already won. But my mind wasn't at the table anymore. It was retracing every single moment over the past year. Every whisper of suspicion I'd brushed aside. The late nights Mark claimed he was working late, but came home smelling faintly of Claire's perfume. The afternoon she dropped by when I wasn't home, claiming she was just there to return something to Dad. The way they had both started speaking to each other in half sentences at gatherings, as if there was a language they shared that no one else could decode. I remembered Mia's trembling voice just minutes ago. The urgency, the fear in it. Claire and Mark had been together for months. The inheritance, the fraud accusations, all of it was just a stepping stone toward their real prize, Dad's house. That house wasn't just property. It was my childhood, my mother's garden still blooming out back, the swing set Dad had refused to take down even after I'd grown up. It was everything they knew I cherished, and now they wanted to rip it from me and leave my name smeared in criminal charges. I forced my lips into a soft smile, pretending to still be blissfully unaware. I even raised my glass a little higher, letting the crystal catch the light like I was celebrating along with them. But inside, a fire was taking shape, slow, deliberate, and dangerous. I knew I had something they didn't know about. The cameras. Mark had fought me when I installed them 2 years ago after a break-in down the street. He said it was paranoid and unnecessary, but I insisted. And now, that insistence might be the only thing standing between me and complete ruin. I pictured them, those tiny black lenses tucked into the corners of the living room and kitchen, quietly recording everything in perfect high definition. I had never needed them before. But now, I realized they might hold the truth. The proof that could shatter their carefully built lies. I took a sip of wine, keeping my eyes fixed on Claire. She was laughing, tossing her hair back, leaning toward Mark in a way that looked friendly to the casual observer, but screamed intimacy to me. Her hand brushed his arm for just a moment, and though it was small, I caught it. And the way Mark didn't flinch, didn't move away, it told me everything I needed to know. I kept my expression calm, my voice light when I spoke. So Claire, what's next for you? Any big plans? She grinned, her eyes sparkling with something that made my stomach turn. Oh, just working on a few personal projects. I think this year's going to be a big one for me. I bet it would. Dad chuckled, completely oblivious to the undercurrent of venom swirling at the table. He started telling a story from years ago, about the time Claire and I had tried to bake him a birthday cake, and ended up setting the oven mitts on fire. I laughed when everyone else did, but my mind was elsewhere, already planning how to get home without raising suspicion, how to retrieve the footage without Mark knowing. The cameras were cloud-based. That meant I didn't need to physically be there to pull the recordings. All I needed was a few minutes alone with my phone and the app. I could do it tonight. But I also knew that if I acted too soon, they might catch on. If Claire or Mark realized I had proof before I was ready to use it, they'd find a way to destroy it or spin it. I needed them confident. I needed them relaxed enough to get sloppy. So I sat through the rest of dinner, nodding at stories, sipping wine, answering questions. On the surface, I was the same old me, mild, accommodating, unaware. But beneath that mask, I was storing away every detail, the look Claire shot Mark when Dad mentioned the house, the way Mark avoided meeting my eyes when the conversation drifted near money, the subtle shift in Claire's tone when she talked about new opportunities. Every word was a piece of a puzzle. And soon, I'd have the whole picture. When dessert came out, Claire's favorite chocolate mousse, I even complimented her on making it. She smirked, probably thinking I was too naive to realize she hadn't just been baking this week. I let them have their moment, because soon I'd take it all away. And when I did, it wouldn't just be revenge. It would be the kind of justice they wouldn't see coming until it crushed them. When I got home that night, the air felt heavier than usual, like even the walls were holding their breath with me. I didn't turn on the lights right away. Instead, I walked straight to the cabinet under the stairs where the small black security drive sat hidden behind a stack of old board games. My fingers trembled slightly as I plugged it into my laptop, scrolling through days' worth of still frames until one caught my eye. Mark at the kitchen counter, leaning in toward Claire. It wasn't a friendly conversation. The way his hand brushed hers, the way she smirked while glancing toward the hallway as if checking whether I might appear, it told a story all on its own. I clicked through the timestamps like flipping pages in a book I didn't want to read but couldn't put down. There was Claire again a week earlier sitting at my desk. She had my file cabinet open, rifling through folders. She paused on the one labeled bank statements, snapping photos with her phone. I remembered that day now. She'd said she'd stop by to drop off some soup for me when I was feeling unwell. I never thought to question why I'd heard my desk chair rolling when I came downstairs. Then came the footage from 3 nights ago. Mark unlocked my office after midnight. He didn't even bother turning on the main light, just enough glow from his phone to see him pull a flash drive from his pocket and insert it into my computer. The next morning, he'd kissed my forehead and left early, claiming he had a meeting. The last clip was the one that turned my stomach into ice. Claire, sitting at my kitchen island, opening my laptop, scrolling through my banking app. She typed something quickly, closed it, then smiled faintly, almost smug, before erasing the browser history. I sat back in my chair, watching the cursor blink on a blank document, and I realized there it was. The truth. Cold, undeniable, timestamped truth. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to storm into the living room and throw accusations. I needed to be patient. Let the poison they'd brewed seep back into their own veins. I started with screenshots. Every incriminating frame. Every damning moment preserved in still images. Then I went into my email and began drafting anonymous messages. One to Dad's lawyer, subject line. You might want to see this before the will is finalized. Another to Mia with the same attachments in only one sentence. Now you understand why they're working so hard to push me out. Just the evidence, plain and sharp as broken glass. I knew Dad's lawyer would have to bring it up to him. I also knew Mia, with her sharp tongue and zero tolerance for injustice, would be on the phone within the hour, planting seeds of doubt in every ear in the family. And as for Mark and Claire, they wouldn't see it coming. They'd think they'd been clever, that I was still sitting in the corner licking my wounds, when in reality I'd already lit the fuse under their carefully built tower. By the time I shut down my laptop, it was nearly 3 in the morning. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my heartbeat steady for the first time in weeks. I didn't need to confront them right now. I didn't need to raise my voice or demand explanations. All I had to do was wait. Because the thing about lies is, they crumble fast when the truth is already on its way to the right people. And so I waited. Patient, silent, smiling when Mark kissed my cheek the next morning like nothing was wrong. Because I knew. And soon, they would know that I knew. And that's when the real unraveling would begin. Dad's voice was cold when he called us all to the living room. The curtains were drawn, sunlight spilling in just enough to highlight the stack of documents on the coffee table. My heart didn't race. I had already made peace with the outcome. I knew what was coming. But Claire and Mark didn't. They still thought they could talk their way out of anything. Dad didn't look at me when I entered. He didn't need to. His eyes were locked on Claire and Mark, his jaw set in a way I'd only seen once before, when he'd caught a business partner stealing from him decades ago. The lawyer stood beside him, a tall man in a dark suit, flipping open a folder with deliberate slowness. We have some matters to address, he began, his voice calm but laced with finality. He laid out the first set of photographs, screenshots from my home security camera. Mark's face went pale instantly. The first image was of him in my study. The second of Claire beside him, both of them rifling through my desk drawers. Claire's eyes darted to me, searching for any hint of triumph on my face. I gave her none. Then came the emails, printed in black and white, each one a nail in their coffin. Correspondence between Claire and Mark discussing bank account alterations, instructing each other on how to make the transfers look natural. The words "she'll never see it coming" circled in red ink. Mark swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. Claire's lips trembled, but she still tried. This isn't what it looks like," she stammered, but her voice cracked halfway through. Dad didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. "I raised both of you differently," he said quietly, though the weight of his disappointment was louder than any shout. "And yet here we are." The lawyer slid another document across the table. Dad's new will. "Effective immediately, Claire will be removed from all inheritance rights," the lawyer read aloud. "Her share will be divided between the remaining heirs." Claire's eyes widened, horror settling in. "Dad, you can't." "I can," he interrupted, his voice sharp now. "And I have." Then, as if to twist the knife further, the lawyer turned to Mark. "Mr. Mark Thompson, these are divorce papers prepared on behalf of your wife. She has seen the evidence. She will be proceeding." Mark's mouth opened, then shut again. For once he had nothing to say. I sat there in silence, my hands folded in my lap. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. There was no satisfaction in the performance, only in the justice. My silence was its own statement. Claire looked at me one last time, her face pale, her eyes glassy. She wanted me to say something, anything to soften the blow. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth had spoken louder than I ever could. And in that moment, I realized revenge didn't always need fire or fury. Sometimes it only needed patience. And the right kind of silence. If you think betrayal leaves you broken, remember this: when you stay quiet long enough, the people who set the trap will eventually fall into it themselves. And when they do, you won't have to lift a single finger. The truth will do all the work. If this story made you feel something, anger, sadness, or even hope, make sure you subscribe and share it. Because the next story I'm telling will leave you even more stunned than this one.